Joshua chapter 11. What happens when you break down these Old Testament books, sometimes what happens when you go verse by verse, section by section, is you find large chunks of history, which is one of the premises of some of the Old Testament historical books. And we get to Joshua 11. Here's basically how it works, at least how most people break it down. 11 and 12 are kind of broken together, and then 13 to 21 is the next section. It's really what it is. And here's what happens. In 11 and 12, there's a list of wars and battles that went through. 13 to 21 is where Joshua assigns the land. And it's all basically one thought and just an awful lot of history. So tonight, what we'll do, I won't spend really probably any time in 12, and I'll give a little break. Let me do that real quick right now. 12 is mostly broken down in the different kings that came at Joshua and who he defeated. You say, it's just a long list of how many people Joshua beat, all right? Really what it comes down to. Why? Now, if you take it, and it's a really neat historical study. If you take some time and break down each king, you're going to see in a lot of those there was promises, they were enemies of Israel, and there are some neat victories in there that you can see where just how, if you go back and study some of the history and some of them how they kept Israel captive, and there's just all kinds of aspects, which we won't break down in all that detail tonight. But Joshua 12 is very much a historical aspect of all of the different people who were ultimately really over a 7-year span. Because what happens is the true great triumph starts now and goes to what we believe to be about 7 years. We believe 7 years because Caleb was a certain age when this happened, after it's a breakdown of Caleb's age, and before he went on to take off the mountain, before he wanted his land. So we think it's about a 7-year time of these two chapters cover and all the different battles that come in it. Tonight, as we think about this, I'm going to focus most of the attention tonight on Joshua chapter 11. And I want to talk about this idea, embattled faith. Embattled faith. We've talked about different types of faith. This is our journey of faith. Let me ask you a question. If you've ever done any kind of sports, whether you've heard commentators say this or worked been on a team, you hear this phrase. And as I walk through this, it's kind of a phrase I'm going to use off and on in this lesson tonight. The team's greatest defense is a strong offense. All right? Sometimes when we get to the idea of spiritual warfare, let me give you a picture of what I believe to be a wrong picture of spiritual warfare. And we'll talk about a little more introduction in a second, but sometimes spiritual warfare is us hiding in the corner with Satan beating us up. And hopefully at some point he'll stop. All right? And that's how it feels sometimes. We feel helpless. We can't do anything about it. And we're in the corner. We're like, what's going on? And in some occasions, that's how it comes across. I don't believe that's how God intended it. The Bible says, greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. Having said that, if we allow Satan's battle to overwhelm us, we can begin to think that. Warren Wiersbe, in his book, The Strategy of Satan, talks a lot about the fact that spiritual warfare, Satan's strategy, starts in the mind. He uses lies, uses deceptions, and he wants you to believe lies. And some of the lies are, God doesn't care. Some of the lies are, you aren't good enough. You're too much of a sinner. You deserve everything coming your way. If you only did this, then God would do this. This is something that I was talking to somebody the other day. It's the wording's kind of immature, if you can say. You ever felt like sometimes if you can just do the right thing, magically you can get God to move? Here's what I mean. If I pray right or I do this, and I tell you, there is no special combination to all of a sudden get God to start moving, all right? God says, diligently seek him, be in your face, go before God, and in God's timing, he'll work. And I think a lot of times we sit back and say, if I move right and do this right, then God will bring lightning down from heaven. I wish God sometimes brought lightning down from heaven. I'm glad when I'm having a bad day he doesn't. And other occasions I wish he did. I hear of missionaries talk about great miracles. At the same case, what did they have to endure before they saw the miracle? I think of the story of Nate Saint and Jim Elliott and the missionaries who were with him. They went to, I believe it was the Alka Indians. And they were finding different ways to minister, and they'd taken their families out. And the day that, through a lot of times, just kind of dropping food from a plane and meeting, the tribe agreed to meet with this group of missionaries on the river. And we found out through history that the reason they met with the missionaries was to kill them. And so in that, they were killed. If you ever seen the movie, they put out The Edge of the Spear, I think is what it's called. It's a great movie because it doesn't just cover that part. There's a part, which is the truth. This is the part that absolutely blows my mind. Most people say, look what Satan did. I'm out of here. You know what their wives did? Grabbed their kids, went and moved in with the Indians who had killed their families. Now, most of us in the 21st century would say, you're crazy. God's given up on you. Why would you do that? And here's what they said. Our husbands gave everything. We need to go and continue to serve. By the way, they were able to win this tribe to the Lord. And later, one of the sons was traveling not that long ago, our country, with one of those Indians traveling about how he got saved, the one that killed his father. In fact, The Edge of the Spirit, the movie and the book, is written from the son's point of view. Now, we look at a lot of this and we say, I'm in battle. Can I tell you, if you're going to serve, if you're going to move forward in God, you are going to endure some level of spiritual attack or oppression. Now, let me explain one thing real quick. There is no such thing as spiritual possession or satanic possession if you're saved. If you have the Holy Spirit in you, cannot be possessed by Satan. But boy, you can be oppressed heavily. Let's read a few verses from Joshua chapter 11, then we'll get into this. The Bible says this, and it came to pass when Jabin the king of Hazor had heard those things, and he sent to Joab king of Madon, and the king of Shimron, and to the king of Ashphath, and to the kings that were on the north of the mountains, and the plain south of Chinneroth, and in the valley, and in the borders of Doran on the west, and to the Canaanite in the east and the west, and to the Amorite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Jebusite of the mountains, and to the Hivite under Hermon in the land of Mizpeh. And they went out, they and all of their host with them, much people, even as the sand is upon the seashore, in multitude with horses and chariots very many. Verse 5, and when all these kings were met together, they came and pitched together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. Verse 6, and the Lord said unto Joshua, I'm glad he said this, be not afraid because of them, because I'm sure he was frightened. For tomorrow about this time will I deliver them up, all slain before Israel. Thou shalt hew their horses and burn their chariots with fire. So Joshua came and all the people of war with him, and against them by the waters of Merom suddenly, and they fell upon them. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel, who smote them and chased them unto great Zidon, and unto Mizraim, I might say that right, and unto the valley of Mizpah eastward. And they smote them until they left them none remaining. And Joshua did unto them as the Lord bade him. He hewed their horses and burnt their chariots with fire. And Joshua at the time turned back and took Hazor and smote the king thereof with the sword, for Hazor before time was ahead of those kingdoms. Let's have separate there and have a word of prayer. Lord, we are grateful for the privilege to study your word. Lord, may the thoughts tonight that you've laid upon my heart and encouraged me with be an encouragement to those here tonight. Father, may we learn and may we, Lord, see a vision, Lord, not only for how you work and how you fight for us, but Lord, what we should do in the meantime during these battles. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. We think of the idea, think about this, right? They find out that Joshua has destroyed some enemies, some pretty serious enemies. And so in wisdom, all the kings who probably hated each other, maybe at one point fought against each other, said, hey, I got an idea. This guy is taking out armies bigger than him. Let's just all get him at the same time. By the way, strategically a very wise move. What's the phrase? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. These kings didn't like each other, but we can get rid of Joshua. We'll be friends for a little bit of time. So literally what he says is Joshua, in still a relatively small Israel army, a small army of Israel, looks out on an army that the Bible describes as the sand of the seashore. Here's the idea. There are so many people, so many chariots, so many horses that you just really couldn't see the end of it. Greatly outnumbering this group. And Joshua has just seen some great battles. Would you agree with me that no matter how great a victory you've seen God just do, the next one still seems too big? Ever been there? No matter how great the victory was yesterday, tomorrow's is just still a little bit too much. Now, it's not for God, it is a too much for my faith is really what it comes down to. God has never found a battle too big for him, but sometimes I realize the battle seems to be a little too big of my view of God. That's what it comes down to. He's not too big for God. The battle can be too big for my view of God. Because if I had a strong enough view of God, I'd look at the battle and say, let's see what he's going to do here. Now, the Bible doesn't say that Joshua was afraid. I think he was so afraid he couldn't talk because he doesn't say anything, right? And God comes in and says, don't be afraid of them. Don't worry about this. About this time tomorrow, they're all gone. Now, I'll be honest, if you ever read these Old Testament stories, you say, if God came down and whispered in your ear, hey, tomorrow I'm going to do this, it'd be a little easier to go to battle. And he does. By the way, Joshua didn't have the Bible. He didn't have history. He didn't have the stories of Joshua to remind us of the power of God. And so he goes to battle. I want to talk a little bit, just an introduction, about some just simple thoughts on spiritual warfare. Then we'll get into this section. Ephesians 6:11 through 13 says, "Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." The word wiles means strategies of the devil. Verse 12, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." To me, it's the most important verses. It simply says we don't wrestle against each other. We don't wrestle against what we think's the problem. It is Satan that we are fighting against. Verse 13, "Wherefore, because of this, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, the day of the war, and having done all, to stand." In this passage, by the way, what we've been told to do, stand. Not hide, not cower in the corner. Stand. Stand strong. Stand firm. Don't move. Just stand. One of the hardest things we'll do, because when we see the enemy, man, we want to run. We want to hide. He says, just stand. If we were to look at verse 16, it says this, "And above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith we should be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked." My wife read something to me as she's in study with the ladies in this verse, and I'll tell you what, the truth, I've shared it with several people. And even when I shared other people, wow, man, I missed that. I hate it. I hate it when I read someone else and I miss something I should have gotten. But I'm glad other people are writing. All right? We look at the fiery darts. Now, the one thing they pointed out, the word darts is not an accident. They weren't arrows. They were darts. All right? Smaller. Here's the point. The fiery darts were not necessarily in and of themselves in historical warfare meant to kill people. They could, but not necessarily themselves. They were small in comparison. The premise was the fact that they were fiery. And so when you're on the battlefield, these fiery darts were sent down to light on fire around you. So what's happening is the warriors were so busy putting out fires and relatively small fires so they wouldn't become too big. They're so busy putting out these small fires, they don't see the enemy attacking. They're so distracted with things that, yes, if let out of control, can consume them, but in reality themselves are not that big of a deal, and I'm so busy stomping in a fire, I don't see the guy with the sword coming at me. That's the point. He said, we've got to be careful that we take the shield of faith, we can put him down, so we can quench these things. Here's the premise. All these distractions, all these things that we are convinced are the things that Satan's using are just distractions to keep our mind off of Satan's real strategy. The distraction, the thing you never expect to happen. A few weeks ago we were playing, I want to say it was our first home soccer game. And we're playing a team, and we have two of our subs are sixth graders. And so I put them both in there. Now let me tell you a little bit about my two sixth graders on this girls soccer team. They're more aggressive than most of the juniors. No, they're not least bit afraid of anybody out there. Well, one of them, the ball was kicked, and I always say, when you get close, just kick it. And so she kicked it. And it passed the goalie, and then it slowly trickled right into the goal. All right? But no one thought, this goalie's going, she's a little girl, and all of a sudden, bam, hits the ball. It's the distraction. It's the one thing you don't think's going to happen. Now, if you come to last Friday's game, everybody scored, I think. Some of them twice. And it was fun in one part if you like seeing a lot of goals. And we look at this idea, Satan wants to bring in distractions. And if I can be busy fighting things that in reality are not that big of a deal. Now, how do we distinguish it? In every situation is differently. I miss what Satan is really doing. In the idea of embattled faith, we can be so consumed and so frightened over little things that we miss the true battle. So what do we do? Can I encourage you? The spiritual warfare, we're going to see and experience things that seem impossible. And that's exactly how Satan wants it. He wants it to look impossible. He wants to be convinced it's overwhelming. He wants us to believe there's nothing we can do about it. Let me encourage you in one thought. Remember, spiritual warfare is supernatural. But what is our armor as well? We can use supernatural. I like the word divine. That's the whole point of the spiritual warfare. Throughout the years, I've mentioned that we talk a lot about doing my devotions every day. If I miss one, is it a sin? And here's what I go from. Like we talked about Mary, if we can get back to the importance of not whether or not I do a spiritual act in reading my Bible, but if I can be reminded of the need, I won't need somebody to tell me to do something. Right? If I'm like, well, if I don't read my Bible, the preacher's going to preach against it, I'm going to feel guilty next week. That won't do any good because I won't really get from God what I need. But if I can come to the realization that this book, 2,000 years after it was written, still has the answers for whatever's going to come this week, I'd read it. Let me ask you. Now, I won't ask if anybody here reads their horoscope, or we won't get into that detail. But if you could have a real information placed at your doorstep and said, this is what's going to happen Thursday, would you want to read it? No? I would. I'm sorry, I'm too impatient. I'm such a control freak, I'd want to read it and then change it. That's how I would be. But when you look at it, if I knew, now, fortunately, I can't go to the book of Psalms and God tells me on Thursday, May whatever, this was going to happen. But what I can do is I can go to the Bible and I can learn that there's some things that don't change. You know, the Bible says, what Solomon say, there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing we'll face today that they didn't face when they were writing this. As a matter of fact, they faced even worse. Now, granted, Paul didn't have a smartphone, all right? So it's a little more in our face, but the idea is the temptations are the same. And our battle and our armor is the same. I want to give 4 thoughts, really 3 principles and then 1 closing thought. The first principle in spiritual war, what do I do when I'm going through it? It's more about what I understand. The one principle is this. When serving God, his work can get the wrong attention. What's the wrong attention? Satan. If you don't want Satan to fight you, hide in the corner. All right? That doesn't mean he doesn't notice you. That just means he's won and he's got you pinned in a corner. All right? One of the things, I love watching sports for a bunch of reasons. And I'll be honest, when I play with the teams, win or lose, I hate losing. I've done way too much of it, but I hate losing. Absolutely hate it. But if I've lost and the team has worked hard, I'm okay with it. It is what it is. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some, no big deal. But when you're losing, and you got some kid in the corner, I just want to shake him, all right? In Christian love, of course, all right? Drives me nuts. You know what? Just go run. I don't care if you even get the ball. Just run fast or something. There's something about when you know you're losing and you got someone in the corner, who cares? I don't know why. I was watching something on ESPN. Someone made a comment. They were criticizing. I don't remember if it was one of our teams or not, but there was a lot of criticism because during one of the games, the team members in the dugout were playing Fortnite on their phones. And everybody wanted to fire it. And I'm like, I don't blame them. They're losing, but they're getting paid millions of dollars. Let's go play Fortnite. Right? Now, to me, I'm like, they should all leave. Done. Gone. You go out and fight. Oh, we're losing. Who cares? Those people you struggle with, go get them. And that's the idea. If we can sit back and do nothing, Satan's still going to get us, but he's just going to hold us down. We'll never really see some of the battles that others would. This is true. But if we want to be used of God, effective of God, and actually accomplish the purpose that we talked about this morning, the gift God gave me and I use it, anticipate some feedback. Okay, let me just give you some really simple, basic examples. If you're a parent tonight, how many of you have realized, whether you're done parenting and you've got grandkids, whether you're parenting or whether you're about to and it scares you, all right? Parenting spiritual warfare. Some of you are so tired you can't even raise your hands, all right? It's pure spiritual warfare. You see what's going on, and you see the kid and they're struggling, and your thought is, if I can just shake them, it won't do any good. Because when you let go, they're still going to run to it. Now, let me give you a reminder. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he will not depart from them. Let me tell you what that does not mean. It does not mean that when he's old, he'll be perfect and always walk in Christ. It does not mean that. In fact, when he's old, the word old is a Hebrew word for gray-headed. All right? Now, for some of us, that's younger, but that's beside the point, all right? It's when he's old, here's the premise. It will not depart, or escape is the other word. Here's the point. When he is old, my teaching will not escape him. And that's the point. You keep putting it there and keep putting it there and keep putting it there. But it's spiritual warfare. And some of the greatest things you can do is just kneel by their room or by their bed and just in your room hiding, saying, Lord, help them to see what they can't see right now. And that's really what it comes down to. And I know many in this room have shed tears on their knees for their kids. That is exactly where it's at. But unfortunately, when you do things right for God, Satan sees it and boy, he fights. I wish he didn't. I wish he'd ignore us. All right? Go pick him Bob Noblini. Leave me alone, all right? I wish that, but then he's praying the other way, so it doesn't help. We'll both pray that he gets my catch, and we're good to go, okay? Just let us go. But the point is, we look at these things, and the thing about Joshua, he faced a bigger army. He faced a more prepared army. He faced more weaponry, and all of that. He could have been nervous. Understand, the principle is simple. The struggles and frustrations are real. The fear and concerns are real. The unknown is very unknown. But it's not our fight. It's the Lord's. We're just a tool in his battle. Just go. Keep going. And again, it's not the point of sitting back saying, oh, I'll hide in the corner. God, Satan's got me. Oh, no. If greater is he that lives in me than he that lives in the world, that means when Satan attacks, I can sit back and get upset. Here's what happens today. I get upset, I get discouraged, I get frustrated, maybe depressed. All those things are valid, and I can go through that. But I tell you, that's exactly where Satan wants me to be, under the weight of everything going on, except for the fact that I'm not supposed to bear the weight. He is to be my burden bearer. And what we do is we're so busy. Here's what happens. We're so busy, we're so overwhelmed, we don't have the power and time just to sit down and kneel and pray. And that's where the power comes from. And then I can get away and I can just give it to him. And then I go back at it. It's not easy, but war never is. And just go and watch him work. Principle number 2. Don't allow Satan's attack to keep you from moving forward. We're not alone in this battle. God said, he said in this passage to Joshua, don't be afraid of them. The battle's real, but it's not always what we can see. In the passage, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. When you see the battle, don't say, here's what, maybe you've been there. Maybe this is just me, and a little bit of honesty, all right? You ever been in a spiritual warfare and you don't realize it's what it is? You don't realize that what you're going through is Satan? And so you're convinced you're going through this because you've done something wrong. And you begin to self-reflect. I made the wrong decision. Now, okay, if you're a Christian, you've been a Christian for any period of time, and you're anything like me, here's what goes on. The first thing that goes through my mind is, what sin have I not confessed? Now, there may be a sin I've not confessed, and I've got to deal with it. It may be that all my sins have been confessed, and God knows exactly what's going on. So the first thing is, okay, Lord, what did I do wrong? What am I not doing enough of? And so we begin to look inside. If I did this and if I did this better, and really what we say is, if I were better, then these problems would be gone. Here's a thought that the Lord's hit me with very strongly. Is that not the most humanistic way to look at spiritual warfare? It must be my fault. I must have done it. It could never be that I'm serving God and Satan doesn't like it. Here's what I've learned. 99% of the problems go through my mind is once I get past the point it's not about me, it's about him, and it's about Satan. And once I get that, then I can move forward. Once I begin to realize that what I'm looking at is not necessarily my failures, because God works through my failures. What I'm looking at, when I'm right with God, what I'm looking at is his attack. Man, I can move forward once I know that's the problem. But Satan wants me to be left under the fear and guilt of all the things I've done wrong. We'll even go back, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years ago. You ever done that? Lord, 20 years ago, did I really ask for forgiveness for that? We'll dig so deep and we'll get so reflective, missing the point. We're so busy not moving forward that Satan's got us held back. And we're wrestling against the wrong thing. You know, when you think of, remember when Jacob was wrestling Jesus? There's a couple unique things about this. They wrestled all night long. Okay? And here's a couple of things that I thought interesting. Just thoughts. When Jacob was wrestling, he knew he was wrestling because he wouldn't have held on to just anybody that long. And he wouldn't have ended by saying, I won't let go till you bless me. Now, do you ever think of cross Jacob's mind? You're powerful enough to bless me, but weak enough for me to hold on to you. You ever think about that? He had to know that Jesus says, I'm letting you hold on. And yet he said, I won't let go till you bless me. He knew who he was fighting. He had his eyes focused on the right battle. And then the battle took stamina because it was all night long. Man, anything over 2 hours, I want to be done. It's all night long. There have been days when, Lord just says, you want God to do something, so you decide not to eat. You decide to fast. You don't really tell a lot of people about it. You decide to fast. Passing Wawa becomes harder. All right? You know what I'm talking about. You say, I'll see you tomorrow. Double, all right, make up for it. But then there's some days that you're so overwhelmed with it, you don't even have to choose. You just, you know what, I don't even have time to eat right now because I want to get to this point. That's the premise of fighting and moving forward, and we wrestle against the right person. It is not if Satan will attack, but when Satan will attack. Be ready. I know you said, that's not encouraging. Well, it's just a fact. So keep moving forward. Principle number 3, when God works, he takes care of all the details. Look at verse 21 and 22 of chapter 11. 21 and 22, and at that time came Joshua and cut off the Anakims from the mountains from Hebron to Debir, from Anab and from the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. There was none of Anakim's left in the land of the children of Israel, only Gaza and Gath and Ashdod there remained. You see, what's the point? Anybody remember who the children of Anakim were? Giants. If you want to go back to Genesis 6, we can debate it, but we won't right now, okay? Giants. Now, if you go back to the original 12 spies, and 10 of the 12 wimpy men, we won't even go there, okay? 10 of the 12 wimpy men that came back. Joshua and Caleb talked about the great bountiful nature, all that Canaan had to offer, the promised land. And what did these 10 men said? There was something there. What was it? Giants. This was the reason they spent all that time in the wilderness. Because 10 men said, these giants are too much. And instead of it, in just 2 small verses, God says, oh yeah, we took care of the giants too. Oh yeah, those things that scared you away, yeah, after all the other things, then we kind of took care of those pesky giants too. Here's the point. In those things that we forget, God doesn't, and he's got the details, and he's not surprised, and he's not shocked, and he knows what's going on. And so the things I forget, the things I can't remember, he does. And by the way, he cares more about you than he does your problems, than he does anything else, and he will take care of it in his timing. And his care for you is so precious and so special that he's got an answer that's just for you. He's got the details taken care of. Now, I'm not a detail person. Here's how I do details. I go to my wife, this is what I want to do. She comes back with the details. All right, that's how it works, all right? And then I go, do some of it. I can think long, and my wife, when I get done, I plan something. We have a deal. Let me at least look at it, all right? Then she'll, here's usually what happens, and it's just because I miss things. In the calendar, I'll write it down with all these things around it, and she goes, you didn't see the 4 other things going on that day? I'm like, what? What 4 other things? All the things on my phone wrapped around there, right? It's not me. And so I can get nervous, and I'm glad to have people around that will take care of those things. But I'm glad that I can miss details. I can miss little things. I worship a God who does not. And those things that even I may think are not that big of a deal, he does, and he can take care of. We could take a large portion of time to walk through all the details of what took place in these chapters. And really what we see that God mentions in detail all of the enemies that he destroyed. It was a fulfillment of promise. God is a God of detail. He fulfills his promises. His promise to give the land, and what we see that he took his promise seriously. Now, remember this. If God had come to Joshua and said, Joshua, don't be afraid of them. Tomorrow I'm going to give them to you. Notice, he still had to go get it. Joshua didn't say, okay, I'm going to be in that cave. When you're all done, let me know. That's not what Joshua said. He said, there's an army too big for you, with weapons more than you have, with strategy probably you've not even thought of. Tons of people hate each other and you, and tomorrow I'm going to give them to you. So guess what? Go get them. He didn't say, stay back from the battles too much. He said, listen, I get there's too much, but you got me. Go. And don't back off, and just keep going, because he's a God of detail. I want to finish with the 3 principles. There's a premise here. It was actually, let me see if I wrote down the verse. I hope I did, because I did. Now I got to go find it, which I really hate. And I always write it down, and I totally forgot to do it. Oh, man. Just a second. All right. I can't believe I didn't write this verse down, because it's like the entire last point. And there it was. All right. I think I'm there. Verse 15. I like these couple of verses. Verse 15 says this, as the Lord commanded Moses, his servant. You say, where did Moses come in all of this? As the Lord commanded Moses, his servant, so did Moses command Joshua. And then so did Joshua. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. So Joshua took all the land, the hills, and all the south country, and all the lands of Goshen, and the valley, under the plain of the mountains of Israel, and the valley of the same. You see, now what's the point? And let's look at verse 15 again. As the Lord commanded Moses, a servant who had already is gone, dead at this point, so did Moses command Joshua, and so did Joshua. Principle 4, God's work is meant to continue through generations. God's work is meant to continue throughout generations. You know, probably one of the harder battles that the average church like ours will have is making sure that not only are we standing strong to what we believe and know to be true from the Word of God, passing that on to the next generation. So I'm going to give you just a couple of thoughts in my mind and introductory to this. Why? One, because we can confuse truth with preference, and we won't spend a lot of time on that. We can sit back. Here's the one I see, though. This is just my personal, I don't want to say opinion, it's my personal observation of 18 years, well, almost 19 years in May of doing this, and 13 years of doing it in the Northeast. And many of you who are older will know what I'm talking about. Many of the reasons why the next generation wants nothing to do with God because they didn't see anybody else before them who did. Why would they want something they've never seen? Why would the next generation thrive for something that their parents found to be empty? Why would a generation want to follow? And by the way, they are following. That's part of the struggle. Why would they grab passionately about something that somehow they've not seen anybody else do? And it comes from parents who are apathetic or indifferent, church people who are like that. Church people fight over stupid things, pastors who have failed, and you can find 1,000 reasons why this and this and this and this and this and this and this. But here is the key. Satan can get us so busy being distracted we miss the core. The core is this. What is the next generation being offered from us? Is it being offered a battle? When I mean battle, between us. Is it being offered emptiness? Is it being offered, well, just take my class? Or is there a passion by this generation to share what we have on the next generation? To let them see us not shrink from the battles, but go at the battles with the power of God. Here's a couple thoughts that I wrote down. 2 principles, simple principles we need to understand about passing on to the next generation, what we call multi-generational church. Principle 1 is the needed importance of heritage. We cannot move forward if we forget what we have been. We must remember that what we have has been purchased and sacrificed by others. I mentioned this morning that when Brother Kelly was digging through, I think we called it the archives, all right? Actually, the Keystone calls it the old kitchen. Now, let me explain what I mean by old kitchen. It's a closet upstairs in the old building in the 3rd or 4th grade classroom, which was the original kitchen back in the 1620s, all right? Actually, I think it was the 60s, right? All right? Now, let me explain how it breaks down. If you know our U-shaped with the office in the middle building, all right? That has the weird entrance. Okay, I mentioned this morning. The white building over there was the original. And it was, let me tell you how long, it was in the 60s. Behind, you'll see a picture in a second. Behind here, this is before the casino. You thought it was here before the beginning of time, right? Before the racetrack, I heard that pastors would go hunting in the backyard. This was the only thing here. And then they built this L-shape. I don't know if you noticed. We have a picture of I haven't found it somewhere, the artist rendition of the educational wing. I got to go find that too. So they built that. Then they built this. And it kept getting added on throughout time. But obviously, anytime before we build something, what preachers will do wisely is they'll get someone to draw up a picture of what it'll look like. So, brother, go ahead and hit the next picture. This is a picture I took today, took my phone, of the artist rendition of this building in the 60s before they built it. Yeah. Now, a couple things. People say, it doesn't look real. That's exactly what it looked like around here. The grass and everything, because this is the only thing here. So in the late 60s, when they were praying, now the only thing that's different is if you look to the left, the small building's not brick. It's siding. That was the one major difference. But that's what I noticed. The 4 white doors, well, there's no stairs. I guess you can see it. The 4 white doors were the main entrance. In fact, where the prophet's chamber now was the secretary's office and the pastor's office, right? Now you say, what's the point of this? We're sitting in a building that was put up here in the 70s. Most of us look and talk about how old it is, talk about how it's falling apart or whatever. There was a time before my generation, by the way, all before I was born. That shows how old the building is, right? This was put out as a prayer request and an act of faith by Bensalem Baptist Church. to build this because the other building had exceeded its capacity. At this point before they built this, when there was a big bus ministry, they'd pull the buses out in the parking lot, send people to work in the buses and leave. The kids never left the bus. They ran out of space. I think, you ever gone to our education wing? Try to put us all down in there. It's not going to happen. So they decided as a group to work hard to raise the money for this. You see, what's the point? Most of us look at this and say, I wish, and we talk about how it could be nicer. Let me tell you, without people willing to sacrifice for this, we wouldn't have anything here. All right? So let's go to the next picture. This one's a little different. This is the artist rendition when they were planning to build a gymnasium. I know it looks a little different than the gym does. I know that, okay? This one's different, all right? Now, if you look, maybe you haven't seen this in a while. In the middle, where now is our grassy area where the ramp is, was what was supposed to have been a welcome center connecting the two buildings. And the idea, that's why there is a wooden ramp. It was a temporary handicap ramp until we built this. That's literally what it was. And the gymnasium was supposed to have classrooms in the back and then a stage up front. It had a lot. We'll show you a picture in a second of the other part. Now, this was back when I was in high school, they put this out. I remember them sitting in the foyer out there. And we had to raise the money to be able to do this. Now, what ended up happening, let me give you a quick explanation. The section connecting the two buildings came down to a code issue, all right, why we don't have it. Our building here was built in the 70s and apparently never got a permit. In fact, when they were building the gym, they had to get an occupancy for this building in the late 90s. Then we found out the floor was giving out, which is, aren't you glad they got the permit, right? They can fix the floor and no one dies. But I know, that's a light thing to joke about, isn't it? What ended up happening was to connect that building to this one, we had to bring this building to code. And stairways and all, there's a lot of different things. And so we found out it was going to cost us a whole lot more money, and that's why it doesn't look the same. But I'll never forget years ago, where as a teenager, I watched a church fill this auditorium and pray and commit for that which is now a blue building. It's not even the same color. They made it green, a blue building out there. And by the way, I can sit back and say, we need to fix this, and we need to clean this, and we need to clean this, and we're still paying on it. But when I look at that, can you imagine all the things we do now if we didn't have the gym? Before that, there was a trailer out there. Well, that burnt down, and that was a fun thing to see anyway, right? And I'll never forget, I go to bed, and all of a sudden, my older sister pounds on the door. Get up, the church is on fire. My first reaction, I didn't do it, all right? I thought she was on my case for burning the church down. And we walk out, and there's a huge flame coming. Before the gym, there was 3 double-wide trailers that had been connected to one long trailer. And that's where the youth group met, and that's where the ladies' meeting met. And apparently there was some bad electrical work, and it burnt down one of them. 2 fire trucks stood there, just standing in front of the truck watching it burn. Until the chief got there to tell them whether to use the water in the truck or the water in the what do they call hydrants? He walked up and, are you kidding me? This thing's like, you can have more water in your truck than you need. And they just watched it, which ended up being the reason the thing completely burnt down. And I remember standing there. Now, let me tell you, this is how bad teenagers are. I don't think there's school tomorrow. That's what's going through my mind. Because that's their school. All the school books are right there. And I looked at my mom to say it, and she's in tears. I'm like, not a good time. All right, don't say it now. Now, let me show you the next picture. This one actually, because of the code, didn't work. This was supposed to have been the Welcome Center. Wouldn't that be awesome? We'll keep this and build this next year, okay? All right. Now, we can go on to the next slide. Here's the point. There's something else. I couldn't find it today. I hope I haven't lost it. We were digging out a book room downstairs in the basement a few years ago, and Greg Biscay brought me something. It's a trowel, the tool they use to lay brick. And it's on a plaque. And when he showed it to me, it was dusty. And the plaque said the trowel used to lay the first brick for this building. They put it on a plaque, and we have it. Now, I look at all this, and I see the heritage of people, some in this room, who because of their willingness, this is here. You know how many people in this room have been saved because of their willingness to give and to serve? And I hope that my generation and younger don't look at what we have and say, well, I wish we had. I hope we understand the sacrifices necessary for us to enjoy this. But I also understand that at some point, the next generation needs to grab the mantle and go, and the old generation needs to be willing to hand it over. Now, I don't want to be controversial in this point, and I don't take me wrong, okay? Here's what can happen if we're not careful. We got the mantle, we want to hand it to the next generation. Here's what we do. Listen. Do it exactly like me or you can't do it. You know what they're going to do? they're going to drop it and walk away. And somehow their gift is not good enough. By the way, should we still church like we did in 1970s? I'm not talking doctrine here, okay? I'm not talking doctrine. I'm talking, should church be a little different today than it was in the 1970s? Yes. There are some things that should adjust. It's okay. They're not wrong. All right? You would have never put a big TV in the back of your auditorium. And that why? Because you imagine how big that thing would have been sticking out? And I remember when we got here, they had the speakers. Weren't they out here? We still have them, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. They're up in the attic, and I walk in there, what are these doing here? You know, the other part, I don't know if you notice this, the old lights in here, the lights are gone, but the covers are still up there, which I don't know why. We keep everything around here. But Bob's been helping me. He's like, what do I throw away? If I don't know it's there, throw it away. He's been so good in that area. But here's the thing. What happens is if you're not careful, when you begin to fight spiritual warfare, you begin to think, you know what? It's gotten a little rough. God's done. And what it could be is if God's done, then why is Satan fighting so hard? So instead of sitting back and saying, I don't know, older generation, don't quit. Keep remaining faithful and be willing to hand off to the next generation. Younger generation, grab it and go. Don't just run to something else that's easier. Grab it and go. Hold it. Be the one to one day be the ones that bring forth the next project here. Or maybe we finish the gym and it looks like it did, except blue instead of green. When it's all done. The one that reaches more people so that when our grandkids are up here running this, we can sit out and see all the people who have been saved and maybe are in mission fields and out serving and doing great things for God because we sit in the middle of the spiritual battle. Moses came to Joshua and said, do this. Moses is off scene. He was gone. And Joshua said, he's told me I will do all of it and I won't quit till it's done. We have been given an opportunity and we can say, well, I don't know. Or we can grab it and say, God, how do I do this? And go forward and change. Let me give you an example. We still do this here a little differently. Remember, I heard some preachers that are older than me, which means they're still quite young. I talked about when door-to-door visitation first came out, when you knocked on doors. All right? You know why they did that back in those days? Because that's what everybody did to sell things. In fact, I hear they used to sell appliances door to door. They used to sell vacuums. We've actually had that happen. Come to our house and you say, we don't want it. Well, let me show you. And they just walk right in and put it down. Get out of my house. I will when I'm done. Call the cop on the vacuum salesman? I can't. Seriously, we're getting ready to go to church. Are we supposed to sing special music? She wouldn't leave. I'm like, can you wait on the front porch? No. You're going to leave me out here all by myself? Yeah. Someone else left you here by yourself. I got to go. We're supposed to be at church at 6? We left at 6:30. I got there. We were both college students. We're like, if we don't go, we'll get in trouble for not going, but we're going to get there and turn around and come right back. She wouldn't leave. She says, you don't want to buy the vacuum? No, I don't want to buy the vacuum. You come into this house, it's all of 800 square feet. Somebody who's a guy said, hey, let me buy this $3,000 vacuum. My car's not even $3,000. What are you talking about? But they used to go do, none of that's exaggerated, by the way. It was a Kirby vacuum back when they weighed more than the cars, all right? They still kind of do, actually. But you know why they did it? Because back in those days, that was the way to reach. There was no social media. There was no great commercials. And so the way to reach people was door to door. Now, if you're sitting there down to eat dinner and a vacuum salesman, not a sailor, a vacuum salesman comes to your door and knocks, what are you going to do? Go home. Go to my neighbor. He wants a new vacuum, right? And that's what you're going to want. Someone walks up, I'm going to say a Verizon, don't want it. I'm going to say a Comcast, don't want it, right? That's the way it goes. That was the way to go in those days. And by the way, I still think going out, reaching, we canvass, we do all that. Can I tell you, people, when you knock on the door, they come. Today, it's kind of like, are they Jehovah's Witness? Are they Mormon? I don't know, right? Now, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying today's different. How many of you, here's a thought, how many of you, if someone knocked on your door and said, you don't know me, you don't know my church, can I take your kid to church with me Sunday? I'll bring him back in an hour and a half. I'd be like, get off my doorstep, Creek. I'd be like, no way. You have to work to earn that right. Now, and especially in a culture today where the Catholic churches have caused so much grief in that area. I mean, I don't know if you realize this. We have somebody in church who is prepared for people to come, armed, ready to deal with people who are going to come and take us out every Sunday. Some of you say, hey, how can I sign up for that? You're not, all right, if you want to. My dad never had to deal with that. As we move forward, don't let spiritual warfare come to the idea that God has done. And don't sit back and say, well, it's getting bad, I'm going to quit. No, get on your knee, pray, get up, and keep going. And when you get to the other side, see all the great things God did. When we look at this embattled faith, history has proven the greatest time of church growth has always been through satanic oppression. So don't get upset. Don't cowl and say, oh, no big deal. Get in the Bible, get on your knees, and start fighting back. Because we've already won. We've already won. Let's go out and keep going. You say, I'm getting older. Find somebody and teach them. Bring them along. Say, come with me. You're the next teacher. Come on. Grab them. Bring them. Teach them. Find a way. Now, by the way, I will say this, having said this, there's a couple in our church that just got saved the Tuesday night of Easter at the park. We chatted. They asked me how they could get ready for communion. It was her, and I told her the gospel. She and her husband went home, got saved that night, and they're excited about it. And I said, how'd you come to know about our church? It was 5 years ago. 5 sweet young girls knocked at my door. I took the card, and I said, I'm not going there, but they're sweet. So she kept the card. Neither one of her husband were interested at all. And then for a couple times, she goes, for the next 5 years, 2 or 3 times a year, you guys hang one of those door hangers on my doorknob. And I took it, and I have them still all in my house. I went to a Bible study at work, and they told me to find a Bible-believing church, and you had Bible on your track, so that made sense. And she showed up one Sunday, and her husband. And here's what it came down to. He said, God, he was losing his job. If I find a job in Philly, I'll go to church with you. And guess what? They found a job. And they were back there this morning, smiling, learning the songs, excited. You know why? Because 5 girls that probably they'll never meet went out, probably for the purpose of going out to eat afterwards, but went out. The key is this. We don't know how God's going to work, so we find many ways to keep working. Don't quit. Keep going. And don't just sit back and say, I'm done. And some of you say, I'm too old to do some things, and get on your knees and pray for the ones doing it. Become a prayer warrior. Find something, and may God continue to drive us forward. So years from now, we can see that the history of Bensalem Baptist Church is a whole new chapter, and it's just getting started. We're 119 years old. Believe this, we have a charter member still in our church right now. You're not, Brother Eckert, you're not 119, are you? His family signed the original charter that's sitting out there. He is the most unique independent Baptist I've ever met in my life. He's only been to one church. We're going to put your picture on the wall because many churches need that, okay? If you want history of the church, talk to that man who's watched it. And because of his generation, I stand here. May we never let Satan pull us back, but keep going forward. Father, we love you. We thank you for the time you've given us, the privilege